welcome to Beyond the Pulpit. We're super excited to be with both of you gentlemen today. Excited to have Pastor David Mann with us. We're talking about leadership. We're talking about raising up leaders within the church. We're talking about Growth Track. We're talking about Life Church Academy. We're talking about Protege. We're talking about all the things. How do we go from volunteers?
The big announcement that we made on Easter Sunday across our house.
We're going to talk about it.
That.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that, the partnership that we have, but how do we take people from volunteers serving to into their calling and carrying out the vision of the church. So thank you for being here with us.
I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah. Can you first talk a little bit about, you wear a lot of different hats at Life Church. And the first, you wear a lot of different roles, a lot of different hats, one of them being the campus pastor of our Bethlehem location. You and your wife, you do a tremendous job at that. Yeah. You also wear the hat of the executive pastor of campus launches and development. And you're also the dean of students for our current Protege, but it's moving to Life Church Academy. It's going to be called Life Church Academy. So that's a lot of hats to wear.
Yep. Luckily, I only have one head, but lots of hats.
Yeah. So can you give us a quick glimpse?
And you love dad jokes. For anybody who doesn't know you, you love dad jokes.
Yep.
You are the king of dad jokes.
So how do all of those roles that you lead, and you also help oversee Growth Track and various other things within those roles, how do all of those roles help you to connect your heart to raising up leaders?
I think for me, the biggest thing about raising up leaders is understanding that everyone is a leader, whether they realize it or not. I mean, there's always someone following you, even if you don't realize it. And I think for me, one of the greatest probably when I realized this, a friend of mine, I was in Sunday school, so this is a long time ago. And he grabbed me after class and he said, I need to talk to you. I was like, okay, what's up? So the teacher grabbed me and said, look, I don't know if you realize this, but what did you do when you received your piece of paper that you're going to color on this week? And I said, I flipped it over. He goes, why? Mine was upside down. Like it was face down. I had to flip it over to start doing it. He said, the moment you did that, there were 5 other kids in this classroom that flipped their paper over, even though theirs were right side up. That's when it really clicked in me that even if you don't know that you're a leader, you're already leading. So I think all of these things, the majority of the things that we do in church are actually about promoting people to step up and see, number one, see the leader that they are. And number two, truly embrace it to become a better leader.
Yeah, that's really good.
Really good.
No, I love that because, one of the things that there's a lot of talk out there in the church world or in the church criticism world about that churches have become more like businesses and more like corporations, and the conversation around leadership shouldn't be talked about in the church world, even though I believe that Jesus was the greatest leader that ever walked the planet on the earth. And he calls us to greater leadership within his kingdom, right? And one of the things that we really are passionate about, along with our entire team, including you, is about raising up leaders. The word that God has given to us is to develop, to send, to develop leaders, to send them into whether the marketplace, into other churches, into our own ministries of our church, to expand the kingdom, to take their gifts and their talents, right? I get it if we're just building leaders for just the sake of building leaders, that could be we could criticize that. But no, we're developing leaders ultimately to expand the kingdom, because the Great Commission, right, is to go and make disciples. In other words, go into your world, go to the 4 corners of the earth, go around, and lead people to Jesus. And so with all that said, knowing that this is it's the heartbeat of who we are as a church, not just now, that's not just under our leadership, but was the heartbeat of our church from the beginning.
Correct.
In the heart of our founders and so forth and so on. But can you think of as we kind of kick this off, this conversation, can you think of a moment where there was someone in your sphere of influence that you watched and you saw step up into step into leadership after maybe they were struggling with feeling insecure or whatever? Is there a story or something that's very impactful that you remind yourself of when there's the tough days, when things are difficult, when you're wearing 3 hats and then we say, hey, can you put on another hat?
I think that, so for me, I'm always reminded of the verse where it says, follow me as I follow Christ. And I think that just reminds me of, again, someone's always following you. So we have to be intentional about where we're leading them to. In other words, they're following you already, so we need to be intentional. What am I doing? Where am I leading them? But to speak specifically of a certain individual, I think there's way too many stories I could share. But I think I guess what some of the most recent ones for me, and I'll probably pick two here. One, when we kind of changed the dynamic or the model that we have with small groups. And I remember someone was expressing to Kathy, and they said, well, we don't have a group for this, that, or the other, whatever the specific was. And she said, well, why don't you lead it? And immediate, the person was like, well, I don't know if I could. And and the answer is, well, if God's already placed it on your heart that there's a need there and no one's already meeting that need, then maybe it's time for you to step up and lead.
Yeah, that's really good.
That lady, she immediately stepped in. Florida, she immediately stepped in, started leading a group, and now she was co-leading a group with her husband. And again, they just stepped up and started to fill a gap that was there. Another one that I can think of immediately would be Lourdes. Lourdes has been at Life Church for decades, and she's always been a leader, or she's always volunteered in different capacities. But until she was given certain opportunities to truly lead and run with what God has placed in her heart, we just started to see her flourish. I mean, she helps oversee multiple things at the Bethlehem location, but her heart is all about people. Her heart is about just serving and getting people to follow Christ, understand who he is, understand who they are, and kind of like move out of where they've been stuck and move into something new. So those are just a couple examples, but I think
that's good.
We could go across the board. I mean, I could talk about so many people at the Bethlehem location and different locations that I've experienced through the years through Protege of just hearing how they finally stepped up because there was a need. So for me, it kind of reminds me of the Moses and Jethro. I'm one person, I can't lead them all. Well, he tried to, but he couldn't.
Yeah.
So with wisdom, okay, I need to put other people in. And as soon as they were placed in, they started to lead. And I think that's what we've all been called to do. And I guess I would almost position it this way. So many people are hesitant to lead because they think they can't, but they won't flourish until they finally start. And that's the first thing, is taking that first step.
That's really good.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've had conversations about, and I'm trying to continually challenge our teams, is a lot of times we'll say things like, I don't want to ask them because they have a lot on their plate. They have a family, they have a job, they have those things. But if we don't ask them, if we don't give them an opportunity to rise up, then they will never rise up. Yep. And the worst thing they can say to us is, no, I can't do that. But what we've seen when we create a culture and continue to cultivate and create a culture where people have opportunity, we don't create things to create things, but where there's opportunity for people to rise up, we are always surprised at who rises up, who has incredible giftings that God has given them that we wouldn't have known if we wouldn't have given them that opportunity. And so what we continually do under your leadership, specifically in over development, campus development, location development, and the dean of Life Church Academy, is we create intentional pathways for people to develop in their leadership and to step into their leadership. And one of those areas is growth track, right? We say that every Sunday. If you're part of our church, people who are listening or watching will know what this is, but maybe they don't know what it is. And growth track was a very intentional pathway that we created, not just to give information, right? A lot of times people are like, well, that's just a way for me to get. No. It was an opportunity to share information, to ultimately spark something inside of someone, to then cause them to step out and into something greater than themselves, right? Yeah. That's what growth track is about. Yeah. That's why it says growth. We could have just said track. It's just a track. It's just a class. Like I know sometimes at some of our locations people will use the language class. I'm not a fan of that because it's not a class.
Correct.
It's greater than that. So spend a few moments, kind of elaborate a little bit on that, and tell us why, from your perspective, growth track is so incredibly important to this raising up leaders, developing leaders.
So for me, I think growth track, one of the key components is at Life Church, we consider membership to be participatory. In other words, if you're not participating, whether that be serving or giving, or if you're not participating in some capacity, you're visiting us every Sunday, but you're really not part of the family yet. So for me,
really good.
Growth track is kind of like the introductory class into who we are as a family. And I know that's kind of what we cover in session 1. In other words, who we are, et cetera, et cetera. But if you compare it to,
thank you for not calling it class 1.
You got it. But if we want to compare it to a family, it would be like my daughter's coming in and introducing a young man to our family. Now, he's new to our family, but our family's been around for a very long time. So even though you're walking in, you're not a member yet, but you're trying to get to know who we are.
Yeah.
In other words, you're trying to understand who we are, how we function as a family. So,
That's good.
so growth track
really
session 1 is more of how do we function as a family.
Yeah.
Session 2 then kind of transitions over to, okay, let us understand who you are. We really want to know who you are. We want to understand how God created you, what your gifts, your talents are, so that you can even understand. In other words, when you're coming into our family, we want you to be useful in our family as well. In other words, if you're great at taking out the trash, I want you taking out the trash.
Being part of the family means being part of the family.
Correct.
And active in the part
And
of
you
the
have
family.
a function in the family.
Correct. Our
That's
house
really
is not a
good
hotel.
function.
That's what we tell our kids all the time. Our house is not a hotel. In other words, everyone participates in some capacity. So even the
need that
4-year-old,
line. We need that. We're taking that line.
You
We're
can
gonna
steal it. That's
We're going to
fine.
tell our kids, Pastor David said.
amen. So for us, even our 4-year-old, now she can't do everything at home, but she can take her plate and take it to the sink.
For sure.
There's some, she can, our 1.5-year-old throws out the garbage. No, she doesn't take out the garbage, but she can throw the garbage in the
She
garbage
is
can.
mighty.
If she does, I think
Small
you should
but
film
mighty.
that. That would go viral.
But that's the whole part of Growth Track is understanding you have a purpose here too.
Yeah,
Your
that's
purpose
good.
isn't just to fill a seat on a Sunday morning,
really
because
good.
really that doesn't do much for us. I know it makes us as individuals feel better when we're in church, but it's almost like we're checking it off our box instead of truly participating in what God wants to do through us. And then obviously session 3 is how we can actually get involved. And that's okay. So now I know who you are as a church. In other words, what our family looks like, what we do every Sunday, what the history is and how everything happens here. The second one is who you are. In other words, how God created you. But the third one is now, how can I get involved? You're great at taking out the trash. Well, let's get you connected with the right team. You're great at singing. Let's get you connected to the right team. So I think that's what's really important, because so many people walk in on a Sunday morning, or maybe they've been walking in for many, many Sunday mornings, and they're there and they participate in worship, but that's as far as it gets. So that's just like anyone coming to my house and having dinner every Saturday night. Well, I'm glad you're there, but you're not participating in our family. Like you're really not bringing any benefit to our family. So if you really want to be part of our family, then you need to bring something to the table.
That's really good. You know, we did a podcast with, and I don't remember when it airs, and it's before this or after this, but we did one with Pastor Esteban and Pastor Chadi. And Pastor Esteban talked about that specifically for production and that technical kind of area. There is no place else on the planet where you can learn that level of skill and that level of like technology and film and video and photography and sound, and the list goes on and on, for free, right? People pay a lot of money to learn that stuff at NYU and all these other places. And folks like Pastor Esteban that have 20 plus years, if not more, experience in this, who's an expert in this area, is offering free training, free teaching, free opportunity, right? And so not only is it, because a lot of times people can think like, oh yeah, we just want to develop you so that we can use you. No, we want to develop you so that you can be used, right? And you can be an asset, not just to the church, but you can be an asset to the world, to your world. I mean, think about someone who's working in production, and now all of a sudden at their job, there's a job that opens up where it's like, hey, we're starting a podcast, or we're doing some little video thing or whatever. Now you can go, I got experience in that. And now you're able to step up and show off a bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the used word. There's like a negative connotation to that, and it's not. We don't want to, you don't want people to feel like they're being used, but it's that God can use them in whatever sphere they're in or wherever they are.
Well, let's remember again. Yes, we're interested in people participating, but at the same time, they are more important than what they do.
Correct.
Just like my daughters, I love my daughters for who they are, not because they can wash a dish.
Yeah.
In other words, you have to remember they're getting, again, like you said,
So
they're getting a lot of free
wrong for me
training.
to tell my kids I had kids so that they could do the laundry and do the dishes. Is that what you're saying? Is
they
this
should
not
be
the
doing
parenting
their own
podcast?
laundry and their own dishes? Yes, but
This isn't the parenting podcast.
but I think that's the important part, is to understand that like we truly love people for who they are, but we want to see them using their gifts, because that's all of a sudden they're finding their identity in who they are and what they're supposed to be doing in life.
And they're adding, and they're feeling that. What's the right way to say this? They're feeling value, that they're adding value. And it's just something, I feel like God created us that way. What did he say when he created humanity, right? He said, be fruitful and multiply. He said, tend to the land, take care of the land, work the land, right? 6 days a week work, 1 day rest, not the other way around. And so we were created to put our hands to something, to use our gifts. And so when we're doing that, we feel that the best way to get out of a depression is to go serve someone.
Correct.
Is to go do something, right?
Yeah. So if we you kind of talked about this a little bit, but if we hone in on step 2, which is talking about helping people to identify the gifts that God, their spiritual gifts or the gifts that God has already wired them to, why do you think it's so important for people to, like, how does that unlock the potential that they have?
Well, I'll give you so I'll talk about my wife for a moment. So during the coming out of the pandemic, we were no longer meeting in Bethlehem. So we were meeting over here in Spanish in the chapel here in Allentown. And we didn't need a lot of volunteers at that point. Because there just were so many positions.
Well, you weren't meeting in Bethlehem because at that point we didn't have a building.
Correct.
And we were meeting at the school. Just for those that may not know the context.
So we were no longer meeting in the school. It was post-pandemic, so we were meeting in the chapel in Allentown until the building opened on 4th and Hayes, which was in December of that year. But while we were here, Kathy served one Sunday as an usher, and again we had folding chairs. We could move them however we needed them to accommodate for families and numbers and et cetera. I remember that one Sunday. After that Sunday, Kathy looked at me and she said, "You never put me as an usher again. Doing that in those numbers and knowing 3 people to a row, 4 people, and I need 3 here and 4 here, it just wasn't for her." But I think what happens is so many times, and I think this is one of the beauties that we actually do in Growth Track in their first year in 101, is that we try to encourage people to
Growth Track or Protege.
Oh, sorry, Protege 101. We try to encourage people to volunteer in every different area of our church because so many times we start in one area and that's just where we serve because there was a need. And there's something valuable about serving where there is a need. I will always encourage people, yes, if there's a need, we want you to serve there. Why? Because we need to fill the need. But at the same time or simultaneously, we want you to find out where you're going to be fulfilled the most.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
visit as many areas as possible. Find out where your sweet spot is. Because I'll always use the example of Michael Jordan. He could play baseball, but he was great at basketball. In other words, he could fill the need on a baseball field, but he could rock it at basketball. And so many times we have volunteers that are sometimes in the wrong place. And when they're finally able to go through Growth Track and they take session 2 and they're able to understand what their spiritual giftings are, maybe it opens their eyes to something else that they thought that has been dormant in them for a very long time.
That's good.
In other words, hey, they have a calling, a desire to teach and to help people. Well, you know what? Kids' life is right where you need to be. They're afraid of kids. It's okay. We'll walk you through that process. We'll walk you through it. But the whole point of it is trying to understand that there's something out there that may be greater than what you're doing right now.
Yeah, it's good.
That's really good. You know, one of the things, you know, we talked about Growth Track for a little bit, but for, you know, remaining time together, you know, one of the things that we're super excited about and have been excited about over the last 10 years has been what we call Protege, which is our school of leadership. And that school of leadership has developed or has, developed over the years to what I think is probably top-notch leadership, training and development. But one of the things that God had placed on my heart specifically was not only develop to send, but through that develop to send is how can we do that even more effectively? How can we reach more people? And so we are launching, which we just announced on Easter Sunday. We are launching what's called Life Church Academy. And for some folks, you would think of Life Church College, but for us, we chose the word academy. And under Life Church Academy are two pathways, 2 tracks, 2 areas of education. One will be Protege. So Protege will continue the School of Leadership, but under Life Church Academy. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Protege is in just a moment. But the other part under there is our accredited educational program, right? And so we were really excited on Easter Sunday to announce that we are partnering with Southeastern University, which is one of the top 5 Christian universities in the country that offer a seminary program, right? And so incredibly, they're just an incredible university. And so we're so excited because we're one of the only ones in Pennsylvania in this area that are partnered with them. And so we're a partner site, with Southeastern. And we're going to be able to we will be offering, effective now, we're offering people to be able to get a bachelor's degree in Christian studies, in business administration, and over time we'll add more of that, plus trades. They want to become a plumber, they want to become an electrician, so forth and so on. But what's really cool about that is that Southeastern University is not only a Christian university providing excellent education, but it's much more cost effective than a lot of other universities. I think, I don't want to misquote, but we were looking at it the other day just for our daughter. You know, it's like $11,000 a year versus 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 with the
Correct.
same level. Now
Yes.
for us, year one, meaning the fall of 2025 to the spring of 2026, will be online only, but the goal is to have live classes as we grow in this. And so just another great opportunity where we as a church and God is opening up opportunities for us to help people develop. And so we're super excited about that. But I know I gave a lot of background there, but I'd love for you to unpack that a little more, specifically Protege. What is it all about? And what you see as the dean of and leading Life Church Academy, what do you see the future as with Southeastern? You're a lot more in the details than I am. We kind of we cast the vision and you run with it. So tell us a little more.
So I guess going back a little bit, one of the comments you made earlier was not only training and preparing people for church, but also for their workplace as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've seen, at least over the last 2 years in Protege, between years 101 and 201, we've seen different professionals, people that are out there in the workplace. And even though they've been prepared in college, they're coming in now saying, you know what, I'm learning so much, not only for church, but specifically for my workplace. Because everything that we're teaching in Protege, yes, it's got a Christian background, it's got a spiritual background, a biblical background behind it. I mean, we're not talking about just leadership principles.
Right.
We're always applying biblical leadership principles, but it's applicable anywhere you go. So that's been a huge blessing to see working professionals come in and say, hey, this has been a benefit to my life. Because that's what we want. We want to make sure that everything that we do is a benefit to everyone that we're involved
And
in.
super educated people with MBAs, people with doctorates, people with a lot of things that are going through our school of leadership and growing from it, right?
Oh, correct. I mean, it's interesting to see the diversity that we have from backgrounds. I mean, it's just interesting. So I think when you look at Protege and then partnering now with Southeastern, it's just the opportunity to be able to go even farther because now we're partnering with an accredited program. So anyone in our church can go through, get a high quality, cost effective Christian education online from home, which I understand it's always been out there, but it hasn't truly been offered, I guess, through our local church or through a local church in our community. So this is a huge opportunity for everyone in our church, not just people that, I mean, maybe they want to go back for their master's, maybe they want to go back for their doctorate. It's an amazing opportunity that you can go back and get those. Obviously, we're not starting with those, everything available right now this fall, but those are things that we can add along the way. Because again, I think the most important thing for me has always been to see people, number one, get trained, because that's what it's about. It's about being as effective as you possibly can as a Christian, as a human being. But number two, then getting involved. So fine, you got trained, now what? And that's why we ask every student as they graduate from Protege, as they finish year 101 or 201, it's what's next? Just because you finish Protege doesn't mean you're done. Like this is not the end. This is just, honestly, this is the beginning. Because from here on out, now you've been trained for something else. You were doing X, now it's time to go Y. And I think that's the big picture.
Yeah, which is great because it helps shift their mindset, right? And that's I'm just here to help to now I'm here to lead and make a difference. So how do you get, what kind of habits or how do you help students go from I came here, I'm just here to help, and now I'm going to lead and make a difference in the area that I feel called to, or I feel like God's drawing me to.
Yeah.
I think I won't say there's an easy way to make that happen. But I think the way that it's been happening over the past 2 years is as the campus pastors, all the campus pastors we have, they're doing a great job at all of their locations. But as there are new openings in different positions, the first people they're going to reach on, the first people they're going to tap on the shoulder is going to be a Protege graduate, because we know we've already invested 24 weeks of training in these individuals. They've already visited 9 different service areas in our church. In other words, these are people that have already been invested in. They're there voluntarily. No one's making them go. Like, they signed up for this.
Right.
So that's kind of the easiest way to have that mind shift is, number one, okay, this is our expectation. Like, you're not coming here just for information. You're coming here to get involved, to be trained. Why? Because the next leader we need, we're asking you. And it's not because, again, we continue to grow as a church. We look at all of the programs we have. I mean, how many programs do we add every year that all of a sudden we need another leader? MVP is a good one. MVP, we just started last year, and we have leaders in all of our locations. And what's it about? It's about that. It's okay. We need a new leader. How do we find the next leader?
Right. And we're not necessarily just adding programs, because we try not to just add programs, but we're called to be a multi-site church.
Correct.
So eventually the goal, the vision is that we'll be launching a new location once a year. And so that means every year there are hundreds of potential opportunities to serve at a high level and value added capacity, right? Position. Yeah.
And ideally, I would say at every location, all of the core team members or the lead positions, all of them are already training up someone else to take over their spot.
Yeah.
So that when the next location opens up, we already have a handful of people, a large handful of people that are not only trained, but they're also willing to go because they understand that we're one church and we're a large church. And we got a lot of people in our church and we got a big heart and we want to do a lot of things.
Yeah. No, there's so much I want to unpack, but I know we're unlimited on time. But a couple, one of the things that is so important is helping individuals recognize that they're part of something bigger than themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so that's so important. I remember I walked around this festival thing and I introduced myself to some local pastors that had their little tents there and so forth and so on. And a couple of them, they said to me, what do you guys owe your success to at Life Church? And my answer was developing leaders, because that's what Jesus did, right? He developed leaders to develop leaders, to develop leaders, to develop leaders. And it goes so forth and so on. But a couple things going back to what we were talking about, Protege and Southeastern University. One of the things that I think specifically with SEU that's really important, you said online education, it's not anything new, but there is a difference between now being able to do that with your church, partnering with your church, being able to, we as at our locations going to have spaces set aside for studying and connection. And then when we have live classes, taking classes, it's just something different to be able to say, I'm doing this with my church. We're going to provide assistance and support for the students. We're going to provide, I believe, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, but we're going to provide a help them get a device, a laptop or something like that. And all those kind of things that there's just going to be a personalness to it, which I think is really, really important. I think the other side that I want you to unpack a little bit going to Protege, because not only is it developing our leaders, it's also developing our ministers and pastors. Because a lot of people will say, well, how does someone become a minister? How does somebody become a pastor in your context, in your church? And we've used Protege as our training platform for ministers and pastors. And so can you unpack that a little bit for people who may be interested, like the credentialing process, so forth and so on?
Yeah, of course. Let me just back up with Southeastern. I think one of the hugest benefits of working through the church is the practicum. Because there's a lot of practical parts that need to happen every single year online to be able to go through your year at Southeastern. And those are directly connected to us through a church. In other words, you're not just doing a service opportunity to do a service opportunity, but you're going to be able to remember where it was. In other words, through our church, through your church, to be able to not only get connected, but to see how this works. And there's going to be, obviously, there's lots of time with yourself and other individuals that will be there during their study halls. So yes, you could do online, but it's not enough just to say it's online. Why? Because there are many, many hours that will be spent in person. Even this first year, there will be many hours spent in person with our staff, with our pastors, where they'll be learning and receiving and praying as well.
Before you jump onto the Protege thing, I just have a question that I really don't know the answer to. So our partnership with Southeastern, does that mean only those that attend our church can apply through Life Church Academy? What's the answer to that? Do you know the answer to that? No, we should ask that question.
I don't know that it's limited to only members of Life Church. However, their practicum will be part of Life Church. In other words, that part will be connected into our church. So let's say someone from another church says, I want to apply. Well, we could accept them. I don't think that's a problem. And we're not really accepting them. Southeastern is. So Southeastern would accept them. But during their practicum, during their study halls, they would be required to come into Life Church, spend time with us, spend time with the pastor, spend time with our staff, and worship together. That's just part of what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of the partnership of Southeastern with the local church. Southeastern realize that they could continue to do online degrees forever, and it's not a challenge. But the beauty of working with churches is there's that personal connection. In other words, you're not just out there on your own. Yeah. So the biggest beauty is actually that Protege and the school at Protege and Southeastern will actually be to some extent married together. In other words, there's going to be crisscrossing, and people are going to know each other.
Credit of what's that word?
Transfer.
Credit transfer. All that kind of stuff. That's really cool.
The big goal is that Protege students, there will be Protege students and there will be Southeastern students, and they'll actually know each other and they'll spend time together and they'll do part of their practical ministry will be together. In other words, you may be in one, you may be in the other, but you're going to know each other because really cool. Both of them fall underneath what Life Church Academy is. If you want, I can continue now to the.
No, go. Unless you had something, you took a breath.
No, I was just going to say, because it just goes back to the bigger or a bigger kingdom, bigger picture, correct. Right? Connected to something bigger than just yourself, but keep going.
I'm sure people can, if they're watching, could see how passionate we are and you are about this. Like we're just like, blah, 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 because we're super excited about what God's doing in this part of our church.
It's funny for me because for me, Christian education has always been big for me. I love the Christian education aspect. I mean, I led a Bible college for years in Latin America, but for me, it's always been the light bulb moment. Because for me in education, it's the light bulb moment. And I would consider it to be the algebra moment where all of a sudden you learn to think for yourself. But for me, that light bulb moment is all of a sudden it makes sense. And you can actually start to read the Bible by yourself and things start to make sense by yourself, obviously through prayer and his discernment. But I think that's why for me, I'm so passionate about what education is, because it's understanding that I no longer have to tell you everything. Now you can actually learn for yourself.
Yeah.
But going into the licensing and ordaining, I think one of the, I think Protege is a perfect example of how we can kind of walk that out or walk through that. Because to be licensed at Life Church, which is basically to become a reverend, you have to go through Protege 101. And during Protege 101, you're going to receive 24 classes on leadership and on ministry, on how we do church, and et cetera, et cetera. You're going to serve in 9 different capacities in our church. And that just kind of opens everyone's eyes to what ministry looks like, what Life Church looks like specifically, and all of the areas that we serve or the areas that we serve in. And that's kind of the first requirement. And I won't say that's the only, because it's not, but it's the first requirement to get licenses, having gone through Protege 101. Yeah. And I think even bigger or beyond that is, are you already starting to walk that out? Because so many times we hear the comment, oh, this person may be able to be licensed or ordained in the future, and we can train them to get them there. Well, we more consider people that are already starting to walk those things out. In other words, the calling upon your life, you're already walking it out, and that's when all of a sudden we're recognizing that calling. It's not like, oh, we know that there may be a calling there. Yeah. No, you're already doing it. Because at the end of the day, I will always say, I will always look for the next leader in the building. In other words, I'm not looking outside the building for the next leader. If you're not volunteering already, you're probably not going to be the next lead, because I need you to be in the game already. I need you to be in it. So Protege 101, you go through that. And again, that's the first step to being licensed. Now, to be ordained as a pastor at Life Church, obviously, you already have to be licensed.
Before you jump to that, I think what's really important, you said it real fast. We said it real fast too, is calling is still very important, right? Because here's the reality. I don't remember that, maybe you know the statistic most recent, but I believe it was something like 80%. 80% or so, just a really large percentage of people that graduate from seminary within the first 3 years drop out of ministry. And it's because, I'm not saying anything about a seminary, what their job they're doing, but ultimately if calling is key and is foundational to anything.
Correct.
And so what's really important is we have conversations. Are you called to this? What are you called to? We help people process through that before they're licensed. And licensing for us, right, is like what some churches may call commissioning.
Correct.
Or also for us, it's like it's the training ground to become an ordained pastor. That's how we handle it at Life Church. But if you're not called to it, we don't want you in it. And not because we don't want you, but because then you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be passionate about it. So I think that's really, really important. I don't want anybody to miss that calling is first.
Correct.
Everything else follows. Keep going.
Well, and I would even add to that, when we think about Protege 101, we have to remember that the majority of people that are in the body of Christ are not going to be licensed or ordained. Like they're just not. I mean,
true.
If you look at the body of Christ, I'll always use Mr. Potato Head. He's the greatest example because 80% of the body of Christ is a potato. It's not the hands, it's not the feet, it's not the mouth, it's not the eyes. It's a potato. But the potato is what holds everything else together.
And
that's the
dad
thing.
Stuff.
That's not a dad joke. That's just a reality.
I know. It's a good one now.
So if you don't have the 80% of the people that are doing everything else that aren't licensed, they aren't ordained. Then then why are you licensed? There's no one to talk to. Why are you ordained? There's no one in the church. So it all goes together. But yes, calling definitely number one. But again, one of our requirements is obviously Protege 101. And then after that, to be ordained, you have to be licensed for at least 1 year as a reverend. And then now you have to go through Protege 201 as well.
Which you have, in order to be licensed and ordained, you have to be affirmed by us as the lead pastors.
Correct.
Ultimately, we make the final determination, of course, from feedback and from teams and so forth and so on. But yeah, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, continue.
That's all I had to say.
No, so I think when we talk about licensing and ordination, again, I think number one is calling. And I think if you've already been called to something, if you know you've been called to something, you're going to find ways to start walking it out.
Yeah.
In other words, you're going to be the best Kids Life volunteer, and you're going to be there every week. And if someone bails, you're going to be there. You're going to jump in. Why? Because we can see your heart. Because so many times, if you truly have a calling, your heart is already in it, and you're already you're walking it out, even though there's not a title yet.
Yeah.
In other words, the title is the least of our concerns.
Yeah, and what's really cool about the Protege and the School of Leadership is the different type of classes that people go through 101 and 201. And in 201, there's internship. And, 101, for example, you, Pastor Andrea, you and your mom, who is an expert in emotional intelligence and all those kind of things, both of you teach a class, which you're actually doing tonight for 101 and helping the students understand that from a leadership perspective. And so there's just so much benefit from it. And I think what we're doing, and I know, is we're equipping our ministers and our ordained pastors in ways that I think ways that other places aren't and should, and ultimately helping them to be more successful in their role.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have to, as we wrap this up, I have another final question for you. But for somebody who's been serving and they're ready for more, what's a practical next step that they could take, whether that's Growth Track, Life Church Academy, whatever, but somebody who wants to say like yes to leadership or they want more, what would you say is a practical next step for them?
Well, I guess I would say if they're already volunteering and they haven't been through Growth Track, which is kind of a no-no, but that means that they've been serving for a very long time. I would highly recommend them go through Growth Track, because it's going to open their eyes to things that they might not even know. I mean, it surprises me to this day how many people come to us and they say, well, I never knew that. I've been coming to Life Church for 10 years and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, so it'll open your eyes. But I would say if you're already volunteering and you've been through Growth Track, Protege is a great opportunity to kind of step up. But another one is also just meeting with your campus pastor, just asking your campus pastor, hey, I want to serve. I want to do something more. I want to step up as leader. What should I do? Because number one, your campus pastor is going to know the areas that are needed. Yeah. They're going to know, what the areas we need the next leaders in, or maybe it's not leading currently, but it's sitting next to someone to co-lead, to learn, so that when that other person needs a transition to the next location or to the next position that they have, that they're already ready. So I would say, yes, definitely go through Growth Track. If you haven't, go through Growth Track just to open your eyes a little bit more. But beyond that, I would definitely recommend Protege. I would recommend Southeastern. If you don't have a accredited degree, I would definitely recommend that. Why? Because higher education is a blessing. Yeah. Higher education will ultimately open more doors for us in the future. And again, it's also about better preparing. So if we're better prepared, we can better serve the people that we've been called to serve.
And what's so cool about Southeastern is, there's financial aid available. It's all those things to make it even easier for people to get connected. But we could talk all day.
Yes,
but we can't talk all day. So really appreciate all that you've done. I know we put a lot on your plate. You handle it like a champ. Very few can handle what's on your plate. The 80 kids that you have, we in one of the podcasts,
that's why it's not a hotel.
We talk with
right.
Pastor Aaron, who also has 80 kids. And you guys, you guys are champs. But you and Kathy, we love so much. We're so grateful for both of you. Kathy's an incredible leader. She's not only a pastor, but she's not on staff at church. She leads does a great job in the marketplace. But super grateful for your leadership. Grateful for all that you've done to partner with us in developing to send. So appreciate you.
We love doing it. We love you guys, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. Till next time.